So it gives me a great pleasure to introduce Bernardo Ballesteros, who is going to talk to us today about comparison between Greek, Babylonian, and Sanskrit epic, and a particular motif in that. Bernardo, I know Bernardo from he's doing a JRF. He's a junior research fellow at Corpus Christi College Oxford. And he's been kind of part of the research culture there. I talked to him about various things. He did his PhD at, he did his original degree at Pisa, which produces, people probably don't know this, but Pisa in Italy is a bit like kind of Oxford and Cambridge in Britain combined, certainly as far as classics is concerned. All these brilliant Italian classicists are funneled through. That's pretty much true, isn't it? They all come from Pisa. So he comes from there, and he did a doctorate at Oxford, and has also been a postdoctoral fellow in Munich and Henry Frankfurt Fellow at the Warburg Institute in London before going to this JRF at Corpus. And he has, what's really interesting is he has a forthcoming book which he just gave me the title of, but it's on this general topic. Bernardo is one of the few people in the world who does this incredibly difficult thing, actually, which is work on not just on kind of Greek poetry or like Akkadian poetry or even Indian poetry, which is easy. Anyone can do that, just one thing. And what he does is he combines them. He knows all of them, actually, and he combines them and compares and contrasts them. And that's really quite difficult to do. So he's one of the very few people in the world who can do that. I hope he's kind of one of a new generation of people doing that, because that's, in my view, what we ought to be doing. And it's also something we kind of push in this department a bit, which is one of the things we're kind of keen on. His book, which is forthcoming, is on divine assemblies, so meetings of gods, which is something which you get in all polytheistic systems. And he's comparing and contrasting that, not just looking at those cultures, but other ones as well. He's got all sorts of other research things in the agenda too. So without further ado, I shall let him get on with it. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ian, for this extremely exaggerated introduction, and thanks everyone in the department for having me here. I am afraid I must correct Ian about me knowing everything. In fact, I did study Akkadian and ancient Near Eastern languages, but I have virtually no Sanskrit. So this one here is really a first attempt at a broader, at opening the view even farther away from Greece and into this broader ancient global world of myths and epic. Right. So I will first start with a few words about this paper, how it came about, and then I will outline what I will say. So I was invited at a conference in France, in Paris, at the École Pratique in last autumn, and it was a colloquium about myths of destruction, right? So floods, all sorts of catastrophes in early Greece and in the ancient Near East. So it was a part of this field which is very much thriving now, on which Ian has done amazing work, and I'm just beginning. So one of the big questions here is so we know that a lot of myths and a lot of ways of narrating myths in Greece and the ancient Near East are very much similar, and we know that this similarity is in fact a part of a broader cultural system of similarities, which includes all sorts of things, art. It includes ethnology. It includes ways of thinking about gods, and it includes ways of thinking about society. So in this context, of course, the big question is, why are these poems, why are these motifs similar? And the short answer is that we don't know. But there have been two big ways of approaching this, and one is to try and see this similarity as the product of an historical interaction, so and a long-term process or short-term process of influence. So the Greek myths and the Greek poets would have known about these earlier and neighboring literary traditions, and they would have drawn on that. Or you don't accept that, and you say that there is no case for an influence here. So this is the first field, the first way. So approaching it in terms of reception. Is there a reception, or is there not a reception? Then other scholars refuse to look at things in this way at all. They say that we cannot know whether things were actually transmitted or not, and they say that in fact it is best to assess them in an analogical manner. So looking at things that we know are similar, and then exploit that similarity in order to enhance understanding of the individual text. So, and these two branches, as it were, are very much separated in the field at the moment, and in fact, I think that we can look at them together, and this is what I'm going to try and do today. So one way of combining these two strands is this. Whenever you look at a myth in the Near East and a myth in Greece, which are similar, you always need to ask whether there is something equally similar elsewhere in the world. So if it turns up that you get a similar myth, say in the Aztec world, where no influence whatsoever can be imagined, unless one thinks that all of these myths in fact go back to the very early stages of human expansion. So in that case, the idea of an influence becomes much less likely, and so you do give an answer to the historical question in the negative, probably, but at the same time, this fact of finding a similar myth in many unrelated places prompts us to ask again, why is that so? And so how is this myth used in every context, what its origins are in each context, and what its use, how it was used, and how the people in that context again thought about it. So this is more or less the state of the field and the idea behind what I'm going to do. So I will be talking about myths of destruction here in ancient Babylonia, in early Greece, and in ancient India, because this is indeed a case where a relation seems to be there, seems to be very clear, but people do not agree about what to do with it. And so I will first give an outline of our sources and outlining some main points of interest. Then I will move on to talk about how people have thought about this historical relation, and we will see that there is a case for an a case has been made for an Indo-European inheritance, so that the Greek and the ancient Indian Sanskrit myths would be related to an older preceding stratus of Indo-European poetry, of which both the Greek and the Sanskrit would be branches. So that is one case that has been made, and the other one is that instead the origin of the myth lies in ancient Babylonia, which is in fact the oldest attested, and then from there it would have spread eastwards to India and westwards towards Greece. And you will see, and I'm not sure I agree with either of these positions. So the myths in addition are this. The Babylonian one is the well-known myth of the flood, a version of which is found in the Hebrew Bible, of course, in Genesis. So this is a case of influence which is very clear, and pretty much everyone agrees about that. The story is very similar, and except that, of course, in Babylonia you do get a cast of gods, right? It's not only one god who gets angry, but many of them, and it is very interesting how they interact with each other. So this is first myth. In Greece, we are talking about the myth of the Trojan and Theban wars, which of course are the subject of the main early Greek epic poems, which was likewise seen as a moment of a very important moment in the history of the cosmos. All things that happened after that were different. And the third one is the myth which stands at the core of the great Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata. And I will talk about that more later. So let's start with handout number one. That's the main source we need to look at. This is the poem of Atrahasis, which means exceedingly wise, and this is the name of the hero, the Noah of the Babylonians, as it were. This poem is first attested in the 18th century BCE, and it tells about, it's all about how mankind was created in order that man could work, could labor land instead of the gods who had been doing all of the work before that, and then they got tired, and so mankind was created. Except that then mankind becomes too numerous and noisy, and so the chief god Enlil gets annoyed, and he decides that mankind must be wiped out, and he tries many times, first with a plague, then with a famine, until in the end the gods decide for a flood, and it is only Atrahasis that is able to survive that flood, preserving, of course, wildlife and plant life, and carrying the world forward for mankind. So the lines that interest us in handout number 1 are those in which we learn about why all of this happened. So why did Enlil decide that mankind should be wiped out? So let's read that, because it's the only source we have about the motives for the gods for doing that. So I'm reading now. 1200 years have not yet passed when the land extended, the people multiplied. The land was bellowing like a bull. The gods' mood darkened because of their uproar. Enlil heard their clamor and spoke to the great gods. The clamor of whom humankind has become burdensome to me. Because of their uproar, I am losing sleep. Command that there be disease, let a plague diminish their clamor. So what I would like people to note here is the sequence of events here, which involves clamor, then the gods' displeasure, and then destruction engineered, and the mention of the land is also important, which is said to bellow like a bull. Moving on to the Greek evidence, we are in the earliest phases of Greek literature. Of course, this is from the Kypria, the first in the series of the cyclic poems about the Trojan War. Now, of course, we don't have this poem as we have Homer. We only have fragments of it, very few, in fact, and most of them are, well, all of them are, in fact, recovered through much later authors that quote them. And so this is fragment 1, which explains how it all began. And so in handout 2, you get the prose part of this note to Homer's text. This is a scholion, and it is in prose, and then you get the verses quoted. And this is a note, a marginal note on Iliad 1.5, the verse that says, and Zeus's plan was being fulfilled. And this the ancient scholar says that some people said that Homer, and I'm reading now, was in fact referring to a myth. For they say that Earth, being weighed down by the multitude of people, there being no piety among humankind, asked Zeus to be relieved of the burden. Right, and so Zeus engineers first the Theban War and then the Trojan War, and from these two events, war came about between Greeks and barbarians. That's of course the Trojans, resulting in the lightening of the earth, as many were killed. And then we get the verses. this story is found in Asinos, the author of the Kypria, who says, there was a time when the countless races of men roaming constantly over the land were weighing down the deep-breasted earth's expanse. Zeus took pity when he saw it, and in his complex mind he resolved to relieve the all-nurturing earth of mankind's way by funding the great conflict of the Trojan War to avoid the burden through death. So the warriors at Troy kept being killed, and Zeus's plan was being fulfilled. Now, this is an extremely complex source, mainly because we don't know how much of the prose narrative was in fact in the Kypria. So it's not clear. But what matters here is that clearly in the Greek source there is much more focus on the agency of Earth, on how she feels, and on the contact she has with Zeus. Now it is uncertain whether she in fact approached Zeus or whether Zeus just saw her from afar, and it is also uncertain whether the reason for Zeus's action was in fact that mankind was evil, was behaving in an impious way, as the prose narrative says, there being no piety among humankind. Now, this myth, and I'm turning now to handout 2b, is also attested in Greek, in later Greek poetry, namely in Euripides, where in fact it does seem that there was a moral component here. I'm in handout 2b, and our sources are the Helen and the Orestes. In the Orestes passage, you get a mention of the outrage, the hubrisma of unstinting numbers of mortals, and it is in yet another scholion here that you get this reference to Earth pleading actually with Zeus. But returning to the early Greek sources, to the word of early Greek epic, it is very much remarkable that that there was a shared view of the Trojan War being a decisive moment in the history of the cosmos, and that it was actually planned in order to annihilate the race of the heroes. You find that in Hesiod, in the Works and Days, I mean passage 2c, and also in the Hesiodic fragment, although there is no mention here of the burden of the earth theme. That this was a shared understanding is also clear from Homer's poems themselves. Of course, in the Iliad, I am at the bottom of page 2 of your handout, you get this very famous reference to the Hemitheon Genos Andron, the race of the demigod man, which is evoked when there is talk about destroying the Achaean wall after the war. And there is a case to be made also that the end of the Phaeacian island in the Odyssey has something to do with the end of the race of heroes, and again we get a kind of watery destruction here. So it is unclear how far back this idea of the earth being overburdened goes in Greece. It's clearly not explicitly or not at all in Homer or Hesiod, in fact, but this clearly need not mean that it was unknown to them, or it was not current at the time in which the Homeric and Hesiodic poems took shape. Now we move to the exciting part, and one about which I know less, and that's the Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata. So this massive poem, which is about 3 times the Iliad and the Odyssey combined, was shaped in 18 books in a very long range of time, about 400 BC to 400 CE. These dates are, of course, very much conventional. It is interesting that a lot of the problems that Homerists face about how the Homeric epics came about and the kind of ways that scholars have to address that question are also very much present in the history of scholarship about the Mahabharata, and but still there is not much dialogue among scholars about that. I think there should be, but this is not the subject for today. What matters here is that this is a massive poem about war. So there is a war between 2 families, the Kaurava and the Pandava houses, and it all ends up in this massive battle, which is called the Kurukshetra battle. After which the age of the world in which this poem is set comes to an end. So this is a strongly eschatological epic. So it is about the end of time, the end of an age, and 2 things matter for us. One is exactly this idea of the ages of the world, which is very much embedded in this epic universe. So we've got 4 ages, the Kreta, the Treta, the Dvapara, and the Kali Yuga, and this battle, which is the subject of the poem, marks the passage between the 3rd and the 4th and last age. Now, clearly, this last age is the worst and is the world in which we live. So this is very similar, in fact, to the myth of the ages that we get in Hesiod and in the Greco-Roman tradition. Ovid also depicts it in a very famous manner. So this is one aspect, and the second aspect is that the warriors that fight this war are in fact conceived as Amsavatara, which means partial incarnations of gods. So every warrior, or every one of the major warriors, is in fact a partial incarnation of a god, because the war is conceived also as a fight between good and evil, and as a cosmic fight between the good gods, the Devas, and the Asuras, the anti-gods. Now, of course, you don't have to think that matters are so black and white, otherwise it would be a bad poem. In fact, there is a lot of interesting interaction in the epic, and it's not always clear who is good and who is bad, very much as in the Iliad. At any rate, these two strands, the idea of the cosmic yugas and the ideas of the incarnation, converge precisely in the cosmic framework of war, which is what we are about to read in handout number 3. Once again, the earth was oppressed by overpopulation, and war was devised as a way out of this awful situation. So we can read that when the earth, Prithivi, was thus tyrannized by the grand asuras. These are the bad, the anti-gods, the demons. Bloated with power and strength, earth came to Brahma as a supplicant. Neither the wind, nor the elephants, nor the mountains, O king, were able to support earth, so forcefully overrun by the Danavas. Therefore, earth, sagging under her burden and brutalized with fear, sought refuge with God, who is the grandfather of all beings. This is Brahma. Then himself, maker of creatures, gave orders to all the gods to throw off the burden of earth. He said, you must each be born with a part of yourselves on her to hold them. And so these celestials in succession descended from heaven to earth for the destruction of the enemies of the gods and the well-being of all the world. So clearly, this is very similar to what we have been looking at. But what classicists have not done so far is to delve enough into this motive in the Mahabharata, which I think is instead essential. So we can distinguish 3 types of occurrences of this myth, and the first one is what we have just seen. So there is a case that this is the great cosmic framework of the entire war, and you find that 4 times in the epic. I am in the type 1 session of the handout. In fact, this is the most prominent way in which my theme is used in the epic. It is used precisely to indicate that this war is about the passage from the Dvapara, the 3rd, and the Kali, the 4th age. And it very much frames the poem as a whole. Passage A, which is the one we have read, stands in Book 1, and it shows an introductory etiology of the war, but it also connects that to the time in which the war is set, and the same happens in passage D. So there is a very clear intent of connecting that primeval request from Earth to the warriors that are fighting, and this is achieved through a long chain of descent and genealogy. And then passages B and C, they explain that this is in fact happening again now. during this war. So you can see how this works as a very clear frame, and it gives the structure, and it gives meaningfulness to the entire war in this cosmic divine framework. Then there are two other ways in which this motif is used. They are a bit less familiar, coming from a classics background, and they are also less frequent, but surely no less relevant. And the first one is type 2, which I love the most, and it's about the myth of the cosmic boar, right? So at the beginning of time, Earth was sinking into the primeval ocean because of this burden that was on her, and she was rescued by this cosmic boar, the Varaha, who is in fact the avatar of the god Vishnu, or at least it came to be so at some point. So this is a very important one, and I will return to it. And the third one is what I call the etiology of death and diseases. So basically, again, the earth was overburdened, and so that's why the gods had to invent death and invent illness and sent that down to earth. So there are these three types of ways in which my theme is used in this massive poem, the Mahabharata. Now, enough of the introductory overview, which has taken me too long, in fact, and let's get to what we do with this material. So essentially, there have been two ways of addressing all of this, but very few people have looked at all of the three traditions at once. One reason is that, of course, the Atrahasis epic, the flood epic in Babylonia became available only in 1969. So that's one reason, maybe. But most people have debated whether the Greek and the Sanskrit material are or are not related in terms of an Indo-European descent, and that's the in handout number 4, the first string of scholars. And I will return to that, but much more recently, classicists have become aware of Atrahasis, and Ruth Skodel and Walter Burkert and Martin West have made a case that the Kypria is in fact indebted to Atrahasis, and the fact is that this has become the shared view. And in fact, if you look at the Cambridge companion to the epic cycle, if you look at recent work on the Kypria, and if you look at books about Homer and Gilgamesh, people give this very much for granted and do not mention the Sanskrit material. In handout 5 and 7, you find the the cases that have been made by Burkert and West that are the most authoritative and in fact the most complete. So but I think that Burkert overemphasizes the idea that Earth had an agency in Babylonian epic. So he says, I mean, handout 5, the land feels oppressed by the multitude, and then he goes on to say the suffering of the earth is expressed in verses which and so on. But in fact, we have seen that even though that metaphor, and I'm returning to handout number 1, that metaphor in line 354 was bellowing like a bull. Himali, this is very strong, but still Earth is not a goddess in the Babylonian religion, and in fact, if you look at the occurrences of this Himali like a bull simile, a very short simile, but still a simile. In the epic tradition, it is normally used to indicate aggressiveness, and it is a metaphor for the warlike king who fights and roars like a bull. So it's not about suffering, and it's not about being overcome. What is really at stake in Babylonia is instead this idea that the gods must be left at peace, must be left to sleeping, and in handout 6 you find a bunch of passages about that, and it is not so only in Babylonia. It is very much a broader Near Eastern motif, which you find also in the Hebrew Bible. Now, and above all, Burkert does not mention the Mahabharata at all. West instead does, and he gives also a much more accurate account of what happens in the Babylonian epic, but still. He bases all of his argument on the chronological fact. So the idea that the ancient Near Eastern myth is the most ancient, and so therefore it must be the original one, which doesn't really work in many cases. But above all, what he does is interesting. We have seen that there are 3 ways in which this my theme is used in the Mahabharata, and he just talks about one, the third one. The earth, I'm reading West, handout 7, page 4. The earth once complained to Brahma of the ever-increasing weight of mankind, and Brahma created death to alleviate the problem. This allows him, of course, to avoid showing that, in fact, the Sanskrit and the Greek my themes are the most similar among the 3. And that is what I have highlighted in handout number 8. That's a chart. So what causes the symptom, as it were, of overpopulation is the oppression of Earth, who is a goddess and has an agency in Greece and India. That is not the case in Mesopotamia. But above all, the result all of these is the cosmic war that puts an end to one age of the world, which is not the case instead in Babylonia, where you get a flood. So if we boil things down, what really remains is this idea that West, in fact, wisely, but not for the right reasons, singled out, and it's the idea that that there is too many people, and so the deity has to create or send death down to earth. Now, in number 9 of your handout, you will see that I have quoted this very old but excellent study by Schwarzbaum, which is about precisely this kind of pattern, which recurs basically all over the place, from Africa to Western Siberia to North America. So again, this is, I think, strong evidence that this basic form of the mytheme may, in fact, have developed independently in our three traditions. So in handout 10, you have a kind of assyriological debate about whether, in fact, the end result of the flood story was the establishment of death or not. That is not clear, in fact. But what is clear is that after the flood, when the flood hero was made immortal by the gods, that was it. He was the only one who could be made immortal ever. And as you perhaps know, the Epic of Gilgamesh is all about Gilgamesh trying to become immortal, and that's why he goes in search of the flood hero. And after he meets, at long last, the flood hero, he finds out that he will not become immortal. But now I'm reading handout 10, who will bring the gods to assembly for you so you can find the life you search for. The case for the Indo-European nexus is in fact much stronger, because it does involve a very well-defined sequence of events, and this fact that the whole of the Trojan story is very similar to that in the Mahabharata, and that's what you find in handout 11. However, whenever people make a case for a Indo-European background, it is a good method that you need to find at least 3 sources. If you get only the 2, then Indo-European experts are unlikely to accept that as a fact. And in fact, and now I come to my own reconstruction of what is going on. We need to look at the whole range of complexity of this oppressed earth motif in the Sanskrit epic, and here is where I get to my favorite part, the cosmic ball part, and that's number 12 in your handout, the Varaha myth. So we get this cosmic ball that makes a sunken earth emerge from the primeval waters, and this is, as we have seen, connected to the theme of overpopulation in the Mahabharata. However, we do find this same Varaha myth in much earlier Sanskrit literature, so earlier than Homer, for sure, in late Vedic and Vedic sources, where it is not connected to the idea of the cosmic war, nor indeed to the idea of the earth, to the idea of the cosmic war, but it is connected, of course, to the idea that there is too many people. Now, this myth, I think, and it has already been said, in fact, since the late 19th century, can be seen as one case of the world effused earth diver motif, which is in fact the idea that the supreme god sends an animal emissary that plunges into the primeval water and brings up a piece of earth out of which the cosmos is shaped. And I'm at the bottom of page 5 in the handout. So the idea might be that, in fact, in India you had originally this idea of the oppressed earth that was not connected to the idea of the cosmic war, which is the subject of the Mahabharata, and so it may have been attached to it at a later stage, perhaps to work precisely as an etiology of the Mahabharata war. Now, talking about when all of this happened and talking about the dates of the Mahabharata is very, very problematic. But if we assume, as many scholars have done, that it did not take its present shape before 200 BC, then the dates are not incompatible with the idea of an influence from Greece at the time of the so-called Indo-Greek kingdoms that developed in the Hellenistic period. I'm not really sure about this, and you might argue that in fact independent origin is the most likely option. But at any rate, it seems very clear to me that the Babylonian origin theory is very much unlikely. Now, I am afraid I have run a bit late, but I want to close with a very few words about ideas for a different kind of approach to these sources. So rather than tracing links and the history of these my themes, we could think about what they mean in their context. And it seems to me, I am now at the end in page 6, that the main issue here is this idea that these catastrophes was in fact a watershed moment in the history of the cosmos, and since we as audiences and we as well, not we and audiences and authors were after that boundary, there is a big question about what the meaning is of what came before. Are we able to recover that state of primeval blessedness, or was it in fact blessed as a state after all? And so I think the broader comparative discourse here should look at this kind of ideas and see how each tradition, but not only each tradition, but indeed each poem within each tradition works these questions out, and what links one can trace there. And I think at least there are at least two ways of thinking about this. One is the level of poetics, because it is of course authors and poets who are able to bridge that gap and bring audiences either closer or in fact away from that state. So that's one issue. Another one is the idea of moral responsibility. So in other words, why did this happen? Is it our fault? Is man guilty or not? And we know that in fact, even in the biblical narrative, this is a thing. It's not clear at all across the reductions whether there is a clear case for man's fault there. And the same goes in Babylonia and in Hesiod and in the Sanskrit evidence. I think I will stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.